So, welcome to the official DC Shoot Off podcast. This is our first episode. I'm Sam Morse.
I'm Tyler Prince.
And this is our first ever podcast. So, this is going to be interesting. Neither one of us are really trained for this. Neither one of us are broadcasters by trade. We're just cinephiles. Well,
I am a broadcaster by trade.
But I mean,
okay.
At the end of the day, it's all play.
It's all play. Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself, Sam?
Okay, so Sam Morse. I am kind of grew up as, I guess you could say, as a photographer in the Air Force. True photographer, not photojournalist. Came in as a 3VOX2 and did long roll film processing for a little bit. Worked in wing public affairs, merged with PA to be photojournalists. Got into video production and really kind of started diving deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Ended up getting out of the Air Force to freelance in New York for 4 years, which was a terrible time to do that because that's right around when COVID happened, and trying to start a small business during COVID is not the greatest idea, but I learned a lot. I learned a ton. And now I work over at the 2nd Audiovisual Squadron for the Air Force, one of the Air Force premier video production houses, and love my job. That said, this is the DC Shoot Off podcast, so understand that the views and opinions stated here are my own. I do not endorse on behalf of the Air Force or anything like that. These are my own opinions, and we should have some fun. Tyler, tell me about yourself.
First off, ditto about all the opinions. I do not represent the Air Force. My name is Tyler Prince. I work at Airman Magazine as a multimedia producer. I've been doing this video stuff for about 15 years. I came in the Air Force as a broadcast journalist back when that was a thing. We're a dying breed. 3NOX2. I was stationed at Kadena and Barksdale, and then I got out, spent a few months as an instructor at Dimphos, and then transitioned over to the civil service, which is what I've been doing for the last 7 years. Have experience at Soldiers Magazine, at Air Force Recruiting Service as the chief of broadcast, and then now I'm back at DMA at Airman Mag.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So this is the DC Shoot Off podcast, and we are saying DC Shoot Off. We're hoping to include some of the photo side of things as well. There's two workshops that happen each year, the DC Shoot Off and the DC Video Shoot Off. We're part of the DC Video Shoot Off more, but I help out with the DC Shoot Offs. I think, Tyler, you've helped out with them a little bit in the past, yes or no?
No, sorry.
No? Okay.
Juan's been trying to get me to mentor for years, and it just never worked out because I was in my previous jobs TDY all the time, and actually now also TDY all the time. But last year was my first time getting the help. It was a cool experience.
Fantastic. So the photo shoot-off happened back in March. The DC video shoot-off is coming up in August. It is actually...
It's the 22nd through the 25th.
22nd to 25th?
It's going to be in Arlington. And if you haven't registered yet, you can do so now at dcvideoshootoff.org/registration.
Yes, indeed. It was a great event last year. We were on hiatus for a couple of years due to COVID. COVID kind of shut down all sorts of things. But we came back with a vengeance last year, had a great workshop, and hoping that next year, or this year, is going to be that much better. That many more students, that many more mentors, some great speakers. And we are planning to live broadcast it again this year. So stay tuned for details on that. If you haven't registered, please go do so. There will be a hotel block set up at the Hilton Garden Inn, Arlington Courthouse, which is where the workshop is being held. So those of you who are putting in orders and DTS and things like that, you may want to make sure that you mark that you are not booking through DTS, that you're going to be doing it outside. We don't have the exact room rate yet, but that usually comes in a little bit below the rate for the area.
Per diem.
The per diem rate. So, but you can, just as a safeguard, this is what I did for my DTS orders. You can put in the current rate, just, book a hotel for now and, put in that rate and just put, mission needs as the justification for the higher per diem rate. If you have any issues with that, reach out to me. I'm on the global, but, that's a way that you can just kind of make sure that the money's allocated. And hopefully this week we'll have the room block set up, but we don't know for sure yet.
Yeah.
We're still working on transitions. We are still working on transitions.
There it is.
So, talk to me about what the shoot off is. Was last year your first one?
Last year was my first one. I never actually got to come as a student, but it is 72-ish hours of learning and applying the craft that is video. There's not a lot of sleeping going on, and there's a whole lot of late nights and early mornings and trying to get all that stuff. I've done all kinds of workshops that are similar to this and, film competitions, that kind of thing. I find like being around other creatives and just making something, even if the end product isn't necessarily what you'd hoped it would be, is always the best way to learn. But I'm a very hands-on learner, so that's just me.
Yeah, that's kind of the great thing about workshops like this is you get paired up with a team of 2 to 3 individuals. You've got a mentor that's assigned to you who is an industry professional or a really experienced person in military or federal service, and you get a chance to try things that you haven't tried before. We actually don't want you doing military stories because if you're doing military stories, that's the same thing that you do day in and day out. So how do you grow if you don't get outside that comfort zone? So yeah, it's like a day and a half of lectures. I think it's like 36 hours for the actual shoot off itself. It's usually like 5 p.m. Friday to 7 a.m. Sunday.
Something like that.
Exact times may vary. The official schedule is not out yet. But it's a great experience. It's a really great way for people to kind of meet others in the career field, different services, different parts of the federal government. And we do get a couple of civilians each year, usually who just are join and have some fun.
Yeah, and it's not all just DOD employees. We've got Department of Labor. Mm-hmm. Last year, I think we had Border Patrol and some law enforcement agencies, that kind of stuff. So I just think it's a really great way to go and think about this in a way you haven't thought about it before, whether that's someone doing the lecture that's talking to you about lighting in a way you haven't thought about it before, or whether it's one of your peers showing you something they do that maybe you don't. So, our job can be well, not yours, because you have a crew and all that stuff, but our job can be a little isolating sometimes. Sometimes you're a one-man band, and it's hard to grow sometimes when you're just grinding, trying to get all your work done. So I think it's a good opportunity to take a step back and try something completely different.
Right. And it's not just the students, that's the mentors as well.
Absolutely.
We are still looking for volunteers to be mentors for this workshop. And honestly, I forget who said it, but I remember talking to a mentor at a previous workshop, and they said, man, it's so great to be a mentor at one of these workshops because I get to learn in addition, because chances are when you're trying to, teach and kind of get back to the basics with the students, you end up revisiting some things that you maybe haven't thought of in a while, or You learn from the students themselves. Oftentimes they have techniques that they've done that is like, wow, I've never thought to do that with that particular tool before. So, I mean, there's a lot of learning that goes on all around. We also have sponsors, folks like Canon and iCan, that bring equipment and other toys to the workshop, so you can try out equipment from these different brands, cutting edge tech, and really kind of try something different, get out of your comfort zone, learn something outside of what you do day to day at your normal job. It's a pretty cool experience.
Absolutely. I think the other thing I like about it is specifically what you mentioned earlier about the not doing a military story aspect.
Yeah.
No matter how much you love the Air Force or the DoD, it gets old. It gets repetitive to a degree. So I think, if there's something you're passionate about that is in DC, that's the perfect opportunity to try and go chase something like that.
Yeah, and it's not a bad idea to reach out and make some of those connections ahead of time. I know some of the most successful teams with both photo and video shoot-offs, they're reaching out to places or trying to figure out what kind of story they might want to do before the shoot-off even starts. That way they can find out what the randomly picked topic is, and just kind of, they've already got an environment to shoot in. They just need to figure out, okay, how do I tell a story about this specific thing? I think last year's topic was greed.
Yeah.
And a lot of teams ended up shooting inside the hotel, which I think we're actually discouraging, or maybe not even allowing this year, just because so many teams did it inside the hotel last year. But we really do push people to get out of their comfort zone and try something they haven't tried before. But at the same time, if you can make some of those connections ahead of time, it can make it a little bit easier. Even if you end up not using it, it might be a way that you get into another place that's right next door, or find something for a future year. I don't know.
Yeah, it's always good to have a backup, but almost every story I've ever done didn't end up the way I thought it was going to. So if something goes wrong, that just means you're probably doing something right. All good.
Yeah. I have kind of a saying that, knowing the rules is great, and you need to know the rules. And if you follow all the rules, you will make a good story. You'll make a good video. But to make a great video, you have to break at least one.
If you'd like to go see some examples of students' previous work, you can do that on the website under Video Gallery.
Oh, it is on the Video Gallery. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, and there is also the Facebook page. I think we've got an Instagram as well.
Yeah, it's all right.
I think we do post a lot of that, and over the coming weeks, we will be posting some snippets from last year's live stream, so that people can get kind of an idea of some of the things that we covered during the lectures. We're still building the schedule, so we don't have specific people just yet. But I just got back from NAB, and about a week ago. Maybe 2 weeks by the time this podcast comes out. But made a couple contacts there that, who knows, we might have some interesting keynote speakers, as well as some additional sponsors that we haven't had in previous years. A couple that I'm really hoping for. Yeah. NAB is a really cool conference. It's the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Las Vegas NAB is probably the biggest trade show for video production in the world, I think. They do have a couple other NABs. There's NAB New York City at the Javits Center, and I've been to that one. It's not quite as big as the one in Las Vegas, even though normally you would think New York is going to be the biggest and the best, but no, Vegas is actually the biggest one. This was my first year getting to go there.
Nobody does conferences like Vegas.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I
Although trying to navigate through all the casinos and everything is, I did not enjoy that.
I'm jealous that you got to go. I've been trying to go since the beginning of my career, and the
Same.
one opportunity I got, COVID was like, nah.
Of course.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
COVID really just kind of, was
It kind of messed
blanket
my
on
whole.
everything.
I had a lot of stuff going on. Like,
Yeah, I had a
a
small
movie.
business.
We were doing all kinds of stuff. I was making a movie with Brian Passan, and everything fell through. But
Yeah, so definitely a lot of new things that are coming out, and definitely those who don't necessarily follow industry news, NAB is one of those times that's really good to kind of pay attention, because that's when a lot of new products and new technologies and new ways of thinking are usually announced. Like BlackMagic. I mean, BlackMagic made so many announcements.
Every
they're
year.
one of the
every year.
I mean, this year it felt like they announced a lot more stuff than normal.
It's because they came out with new cameras this year, and they don't always, like, they always announce stuff, but sometimes it's the live switcher or one of their millions of rack-mounted things that they have that I honestly...
They had that too. But they had that
yeah,
too.
I know. They usually sometimes it's just like just that stuff and like one new camera,
Right.
but then they finally made
they
us
had-
a box camera, which I've been asking for like forever. I don't understand why there's no NDs on the thing, but
Oh, there's no NDs?
no, but it's $3,000, so I'm like,
Oh, true.
I'll live.
Well, I mean, Reds don't have
That's true, and they're way more
built-in
expensive.
They are
I really
way more
think-
expensive.
The Pixix 6K, I think, is BlackMagic being like, oh, you're gonna make a Komodo, we can do that too. Take that
For half the price.
exactly. That's what the
Or the
that's what
Komodo X, you
12K
think,
was.
yeah.
The 12K was just like, you want resolution? Have
So
12,000.
for the viewers and listeners out there who don't know what a box camera is, tell me,
Okay.
what is a box camera? Why is that helpful?
Your traditional video camera, right, your traditional video camera is a big shoulder-mounted monstrosity, but even a cinema camera like the FX6 or C300 or X brand's version of a cinema camera is usually like a little rectangle lens out here. Box camera's great because usually they're small. There's not a lot to them, but they are infinitely customizable. You're not limited to the form factor of the camera. Blackmagic's pocket cameras, I hate their form factor. They tried to go with like a photo camera, but not all the way. I don't like it. I just want something small that I can rig up and shoot in a bunch of different ways. So for me, the benefits are infinitely rigged. I can go really small if I'm in a tight space, or I can rig it up bigger if I'm going to be like shoulder mounted or, on a gimbal or something like that.
Yeah, it comes out to the customizability. So, box camera, it strips it down to just the sensor, the processor, the things that you need regardless of the setup. But yeah, a box camera, you can have it stripped down and be on a gimbal and have all your monitors and things external. You can have it rigged up as a remote camera. You can have it rigged up, with a shoulder mount and, big battery and EVF and all that stuff, just like it's a traditional ENG camera or something like that. So Red, I think, was the ones who really kind of popularized that. They showed what could be done with that, and a lot of other companies have kind of followed suit. Even RE has the Alexa Mini,
and the Mini LF,
and the Mini LF. Quite a few different brands have done the box camera route these days.
Well, and that's actually something nice that I like about the Pixis that they announced, is that it's a full frame camera. I know a lot of people say Super 35 is fine, and I agree, Super 35 totally is fine. But I think because I went broadcast route, right? So I started with the old P2 Panasonics that had like a 1/4-inch sensor and looked terrible. And I wanted my video to look better, so I bought a DSLR, which was full frame. And that's just what I know. That's what I'm comfortable with. I know the lenses, I don't have to in my brain go, okay, I've got a 20 on here, but on this camera it's really like a 36. Anyway. I think it's cool that it's full frame.
Conversions.
Yeah.
I've had to do the conversions a lot. For a while there, I had I had like an A7 III, an FS5, and a DJI Inspire 2. So I was dealing with full frame, Super 35, and Micro Four Thirds. Dealing with focal lengths for all three of those. I definitely, I feel the pain. Being a photo background dude myself, full frame, I love the look. I am a shallow depth of field junkie.
Same.
I actually this year picked up a 35 millimeter f0.95 lens, which is kind of ridiculous, and I love it.
Is anything in focus when you shoot it?
Yeah.
Just like
look at sliver. It's a 35 millimeter though, so it actually it's got a wider field of view than your typical f0.95. It's not the sharpest lens in the world, but honestly, like, it's got some character to it. It's made by a company called Laowa that I'm a huge fan of them personally. It's just they make really interesting lenses. They don't try to make all the same ones that everybody else is making. They end up making ones that are just really unique, and a lot of other people try to copy them, but they're usually the ones coming out with the weird, interesting lenses. Like they're the ones who made the probe lens, which is kind of this really long barrel macro lens, 2x macro lens with a 24 millimeter focal length. So it's both macro and wide angle, 2-to-1 reproduction ratio, and with a waterproof barrel. So like, you can just really get into stuff. You think you can get close with a GoPro. This thing really lets you, no kidding, get into whatever.
I love that lens. I've watched a bunch of like product videos where guys are literally like sticking the barrel in a Coke can and like pulling it out, and you have this really cool effect that you'd kind of have to do visual effects to get that look.
Oh yeah.
There's no way to get it physically.
Right. And then you get people who are pairing that with motion control rigs, robotic arms and stuff, and you get just crazy results that I would love to do, but I do not have that kind of money.
Or time, honestly.
Or time. Yeah. You're not wrong there. Another, we were talking about box cameras, talking about probe lenses and motion control. There's another really interesting announcement that a lot of people have probably heard, but for those in the career field that haven't heard yet, Nikon bought RED. So
out of nowhere too.
Yeah, out of nowhere. Well, it's not completely out of nowhere. So a couple of years back, when Nikon first introduced internal RAW recording on their Z9, RED actually sued them because RED holds a bunch of patents on internally recorded compressed RAW codecs. They arguably have the best RAW codec on the market, and RED did not particularly like Nikon infringing on their patent. I can't imagine why. They basically came to an agreement outside of the limelight, and there's a lot of speculation that really that kind of laid the groundwork for this acquisition. Yeah, so Scott Balcom had an interview with Jared Land that was pretty illuminating, and he talks a little bit more in depth about kind of the things that led up to that acquisition. But Nikon's been kind of interested in getting into the cinema side. They actually also just announced that they at least have an interest in making cinema lenses, which Nikon also makes an f0.95 lens that I got to play with at NAB. It's a 58 millimeter photo lens, and that one is tack sharp at f0.95. That was really just Nikon flexing on the entire industry. I would love to see a cinema version of that lens, but a lot of people also don't know Nikon already owned Mark Roberts' motion control, MRMC. So, now they've got motion control, and they've got, the original box camera, and they've got all this, decades of lens building knowledge. I mean, we might be in for a cinema powerhouse here.
Yeah, I think it's either going to be incredibly successful or a complete disaster. I don't think there's going to be a middle ground. I read about the thing where RED patented internal RAW or whatever. I don't like when companies try to you're trying to patent the idea of raw footage being recorded internally in a camera. I'm curious, because BlackMagic does that internally, very well, and their compression's good.
So,
I really like B-Raw personally.
Yeah.
What I've heard
is that, and I did get to visit Red Studios, and they kind of hit on this a little bit, and I've heard it from other sources, but a lot of the so-called raw formats from other companies are not a true raw. So they do have a little bit of the processing. They do have a little bit of, stuff baked into the format, whereas Red is a true, no kidding, raw codec, to the point that ISO truly is just a number attached to the file. When you're dealing with the raw video, it is just taking the raw stuff off the sensor before you apply ISO, before you apply signal gain, before you apply debayering and all these other things. So that is where they have all of their extra patents. So in a lot of cases, when you have these internally recorded raw codecs, they've done just enough processing that it's not a true raw, which is how they often get around the codec issues. Or you've got external raw recorders from Atomos and other companies, BlackMagic, where it's not an issue at all because it's not internal. I think that's also why the original Venice, the raw recorder, was a thing that you had to buy extra add-on. I don't know how they got around it for the Venice 2, but I'm sure they figured out something.
I love talking about camera gear I don't own, have never used, and will probably never get the opportunity to.
Yeah, I know the third audiovisual squadron down in
they got a Venice.
I think they've got a Venice 2 as well.
Do they? Nice.
I think so. So they're a big Sony house. At the second, we do a lot with Reds, but we do have some Sonys. We got some FX3s. We've got some Blackmagic cameras. We're very much all about
right tool for the job.
Right tool for the job. Yeah. Although people do definitely like the Reds. we got some Komodos. We're hoping to get a Raptor or two here pretty soon, but they're good cameras. But yeah, it really is right tool for the right job. There are things that they're good at, and there's things that they're not good at, like autofocus. Despite a lot of the marketing, I vividly remember talking to the rep at Red, and when I was at Red Studios, and was like, hey, so how does the autofocus work? Because at the time we didn't have any Komodos yet. We didn't have any of the DSMC3 generation cameras. I was really interested in the autofocus capability. And he's like, oh yeah, and I don't use this much, but yeah, you just do this, and you drag a box on your phone, and it will track you. And the camera was not tracking him whatsoever. It failed miserably. I've gotten spoiled by the
tech,
Sony.
man. Yeah, autofocus tech has come such a long way. Like, not even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even considered using autofocus on video because it was just all terrible.
Yeah, and autofocus that's almost good enough is almost worse. Than autofocus that is good enough. Yeah.
And Sony's autofocus is really good. Nikon's is pretty good. Canon, I've had some mixed results with. Panasonic's is not good. It's not good autofocus.
I've heard it's getting better. I have heard it's getting better.
Probably.
And I think everybody at this point, like the technology's out there to have good autofocus.
Absolutely.
It's just a matter of everybody, figuring out the programming, really. Yeah. The object recognition and tracking and all that stuff. The tech to focus is there.
Yeah, worth mentioning, Sony is a massive company that doesn't just sell cameras, so they have a little bit of a...
True. But they have kind of cornered the market as far as the autofocus, although there's...
Absolutely. And low light.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And on the focus, there's also kind of a interesting developments as well. It's been out for a while, but DJI announced a new version of their DJI Focus, and it is they've got a full, like, what they call Fizz, focus, iris, zoom. That's what the acronym is. A Fizz system, for cameras without, you don't have to just use it with their gimbals anymore. They've got it for just traditional cameras as well. But they've also introduced a new version of their LiDAR system, which is light range finding, much like what's in some iPhones and other smartphones. And it is a more accurate way to judge distance. And if you pair that with a lens and calibrate it and make everything work the way that it needs to, you end up with this very accurate system that DJI's implementation is really interesting, because you've got a depth map that shows you on the screen, but then you can also put it into an automatic mode where the follow focus is motorized, and it'll actually try to automatically go to something, but you can always just grab the wheel and override it. So it's this really intuitive way to pull focus automatically. And I think it's almost there. I think when I checked it out with the Ronin 4D a couple years ago at Cinegear, which is another trade show that happens in LA, the Ronin 4D, you were able to do that same sort of thing. But I think just by virtue of what I was focusing on, it seemed like, I could override it and then it would snap to the next thing that I was looking at. Apparently it doesn't actually work that way. I had a whole conversation with the folks at DJI. I was mistaken on how it worked. It does pick it automatically, regardless of where your focus is. I hope they change that in the future. I would love for it to be able to just snap to things. But if they do, I think that is going to be some really interesting tech. I know DJI and federal stuff is kind of an iffy situation in general, so we'll see if we're even allowed to use stuff from them in the future. But it is a really interesting development in focus technology, is this whole range finding. And again, it's at this cusp where it's almost there, and if you use it without the snapping, it can still give you a really accurate read of where your focus is.
I hadn't seen the DJI one, but I've seen some third-party like LiDAR autofocus systems that are pretty impressive, although look like a nightmare to set up.
Yeah, that's kind of the great thing about DJI is their stuff, especially once it's in their like second or third iteration, which in this case it is. It tends to be much more intuitive to set up, much more straightforward. So it doesn't take the crazy amounts of work to calibrate and set up as some other things. Although the one big drawback that I'm seeing, which is, I don't know if it's truly a drawback, but it might be something that really limits it for professionals, is that it does power the motors off of USB-C, which for a lot of content creators and stuff that are stepping up to this, that's great. But the industry standard is the locking LEMO connector, 2-pin or 5-pin. And that just helps prevent the cable from getting yanked out. And some people might not be super happy about a cable that you can just pull and unplug. So, especially if you end up having to recalibrate the motor afterwards. So, I don't know. I think there's some really interesting developments in the autofocus technology, both LiDAR and in-camera systems. I look forward to seeing where it goes from here.
It's been interesting to see how camera companies have prioritized like pro gear versus consumer gear and everything in between. Kind of feels like prosumer and pro has blended together a lot for a lot of these companies, which is good and has good and bad qualities, but it's been interesting.
I would agree. I know that's been kind of an interesting thing at my current job. Is I come from a lot of, single operator or small team setups, and, having something that's intuitive and just works can often make or break a shoot. If you don't have to think about it, you can do it faster. If you don't have to move a whole bunch of heavy stuff, you can do it faster. And you can just get more footage quicker, sometimes using these prosumer options. So it's interesting to see the blend there. I think there's definitely still a time and a place for the bigger budget stuff, the larger stuff. I mean, Hollywood's not going to get rid of their giant cranes or dollies anytime soon. But they also have the budget to hire the team of workers that makes something like that viable. I mean, even for government, I mean, budgets are not infinite, and people often ends up being the biggest cost. So if you can do more with fewer people, you can stay more days, or you can, do an additional location shoot for pickup shots that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. It's always a trade-off.
Yeah. It's also about not just the amount of people, but the experience that they have.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a little different Hollywood crew who this is all these guys do, or a group of airmen who may or may not have experience with the stuff that you're working with. And I'm not,
it's
we weren't going to curse. I was going to say, I'm not talking shit about anybody. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You may or may not have the experience, and that's okay.
Yeah. I don't have the amount of experience that a trained grip, or somebody who is a dedicated first AC, pulling focus day in and day out on Hollywood sets. I cannot pull focus that accurately. I am not that good at it. I mean, I thought I was good at grip and gaffer type responsibilities, and we hired a gaffer for this last shoot that I had in St. Louis, and I was amazed by like how well this guy was able to rig up an 8x8 in high winds. And actually we were able to use it for a while before we finally had to strike it, because the winds were just starting to lift up all the stuff that was anchoring it.
Yeah,
it's basically just a giant sail.
Absolutely.
But he was able to do things I didn't know how to do.
Yeah, I thought I was good at lighting till I worked with an actual gaffer on a set, and was like, this is what I'm thinking. And then like 15 minutes later, it was
right.
It was in my head, and I didn't have to spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes trying to get everything just right.
But on that whole note of intuitive and working, what I've found is these airmen these days, or soldiers or sailors or whoever we're working with, they've got good ideas and they often have good creative eyes, but they don't have the experience built up over years of doing these tasks day in and day out. So, if I'm trying to have somebody control a remote gimbal, and I'm giving them, this complicated joystick with follow focus and all these other things, they're going to have a tough time pulling smooth shots. But if I give them something where it's tied to the accelerometer in an iPad, and they've got the image right there on the iPad, and they're just tilting it and looking around like it's some sort of VR game, they absolutely know how to do that. And they can pull really good, really smooth shots. So I think sometimes, us producer directors, we sometimes have a responsibility to look at this new technology and see how we can leverage it and make the jobs easier for those that we work with, and, let them be creative too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, anytime I work with people who are less experienced in video than I am, especially if they're going to be producing something on the back end, it's important to me that they feel they have ownership over the thing that they're making, not just that they did everything I told them to do and are now doing everything I tell them to do in the edit. I'm not interested in creating a clone of myself. I want you to find your creative voice and have ownership over the thing that you're making. I think that's just me.
I think one of the big aha moments I had as I was separating from the Air Force, or leading up to my separation from the Air Force, was like I had really made a name for myself being a one-man band. And, to the point that I had products where not only did I shoot everything and edit everything, I was even composing my own music and just had a total monopoly on everything. And once I finally got onto a proper commercial set, I realized, when you take what everybody is good at and bring it all together, you end up with something that is so much greater than any one person could make on their own, regardless of the amount of time that you have to do it. Just getting that creative collaboration is such an amazing thing. And now I don't want to be the only person. I don't want to be, the mastermind behind it all. I love it when, I can do my creative thing with a camera. Somebody's doing their creative thing with scripting and directing talent. And, we've got, folks, like this recent shoot where, they know how to rig up lighting that looks amazing and is safe. Safety is kind of important when you get on a set like that, especially when you're dealing with 3 HMI or 4 HMIs, out amongst a bunch of little kids, that's, well, we were trying to compete with the sun, which,
I know.
Yeah, that's hard to do. But, yeah, I mean, when we can be collaborative, it is so much fun. And
absolutely,
transitioning back to the DC shoot off. I mean, that's the great thing about the DC shoot off is you can get together, collaborate with other like-minded folks and some not like-minded folks. I mean, you can run into somebody who thinks that your choice of editing platform is the worst idea ever. And find out why they like that platform. We're not going to name names. Or, maybe they have a totally different way of doing things, or, one person likes gimbals, one person likes handheld, and you find out why each of those is good. Because at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer to any of this.
Yeah, I think as creatives, we can get a little wrapped up in control and having everything just the way we want it, but if you're willing to give that up, I've got it's a short story, but a great example. When I was a recruiting service, I would end up directing a lot of the stuff we were doing and have, a small crew of people helping me. And I asked the guy, actually Todd Holly, one of my best friends, I was like, hey man, this is what I'm thinking for the interview shot. And then I left to go make sure lights were good. And then I came back. The interview shot was not what I asked for at all, but I liked it a whole lot better. He was like, what do you think of this? I was like, I love that. Don't change anything. We'll just get the lighting right. So those are the kinds of things that can't happen if you're the one doing everything. Because
Absolutely.
You need people who don't live in your head to help you get outside your own head.
Yeah,
or at least I do.
And giving people room to be able to be creative like that. I mean, it is such a cool thing when you ask something of somebody and they come back with something that is totally different from what you asked for, but so much better in so many ways.
And I'm glad that he felt comfortable enough around me to do that too, because, I could have reacted badly to that. And and I didn't, but he was confident enough to be like, this looks really good. Let me show you this. And then if you don't like it, I'll change it or whatever. But it was cool to see. I don't know. I feel like that's what I would do just because you're going to be like, I want this shot. Like, okay, we'll see.
Well, and I've been on the reverse of that too, where I had a director who, had feedback for me that I'm like, are you serious? But this is so great. Why would you tell me to change this thing that's just going to make it so much worse? And then I finally go back in and do it. And I'm like, oh, damn. No, this actually is working really great. And it made me think about the project in a way that I hadn't before. And ultimately, I still made the edits or made the changes that the director wanted. But with my own flair on it, which even then, I did what they asked for, but I also put my own spin. So even then the end result was something that neither party could have come up with on our own. And
absolutely.
It's just so cool when you see stuff like that.
When you can get a team of people from pre-production through post-production all working towards the same thing, instead of like 10 people making their 10 different versions of whatever it is you're trying to make. It's a pretty cool thing.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's we've definitely filled our time this particular episode. I am planning on doing the editing, so hopefully this gets edited fairly quickly. Yeah, we're only I think the counter is saying like 46 minutes.
Oh, that's not bad.
It's not terrible. It's not terrible. But hopefully folks enjoy this, and please like, comment, subscribe, and let us know what you would like us to cover in future episodes. We'd love to bring on some guests. We might bring some of our sponsors. I know ICANN has this whole new line of PoE or Power over Ethernet lights that are pretty cool that I got to see at NAB. So we might be able to get Raymond up on this podcast to talk about those. I mean, having lights that you just run one cheap Ethernet cable, you got power and control all over one cable. That's kind of dope.
That's pretty cool.
So, yeah, let us know what you want to see. Until then, create cool stuff, and don't forget, it's all play.